The blast door of Station Zenith 9 buckled under the impact, the metal groaning like a dying beast. High Admiral Vex didn't wait for the dust to settle. He surged through the breach, his chitinous armor deflecting a hail of plasma fire that would have vaporized a human instantly. But he wasn't alone. At his flank, Commander Reeves moved with lethal fluidity, her rifle spitting suppression fire that forced the enemy defenders into cover. The air smelled of ozone and scorched circuitry, the scent of an orbital siege in full swing. "Clear right," Reeves shouted, her voice cutting through the roar of decompression. Vex didn't need to speak. Through the hum of their combat-linked comms, a crude form of neural synthesis, he projected a tactical grid directly onto her retinal display. They moved as a single entity, a joint task force forged, not in a boardroom, but in the fires of imminent catastrophe. They were two species sprinting toward the center of the station, racing against the ticking clock of an armada already charging its weapons. They had to reach the target before the galaxy tore itself apart. The silence in the grand atrium of the diplomatic corps had been deafening, a sharp contrast to the chaos that followed. The Millennium Pact, the golden thread binding humanity and the insectoid Zeloff for 9 centuries, was fraying. But it wasn't an army that snapped it. It was a single moment of madness. Elena Vance had stood at the podium, her posture radiating a calm authority that belied the tension in the room. She was the embodiment of systemic resilience, a woman who had spent 50 years weaving compromise out of conflict. She looked out at the assembly, her gaze landing on Vex, and smiled. "Peace is a heavy door that takes 2 species to hold open," she had begun. Then the air split. It wasn't a debate, it was kinetic diplomacy of the most brutal kind. Captain Krell, a decorated officer turned rogue actor, stepped from the security detail. He didn't shout slogans, he simply raised his weapon and unleashed a torrent of coherent light. One shot shattered the podium. The next 16 found their mark. The horror wasn't in the noise, but in the slowness of the realization. Helena didn't fall immediately. The force of the impacts spun her, yet she stayed upright for a heartbeat longer than physics should have allowed, her eyes locking with Vex's. In that fraction of a second, Vex saw the plea in her gaze. Not for vengeance, for stability. He didn't just shoot a diplomat. He tried to execute an ideology. Vex later told the human generals, his voice vibrating with a frequency that cracked the glass of the observation deck. The aftermath was a blur of blue blood and panic. Krell had vanished into the labyrinth of the station, leaving behind a galaxy on the brink of critical mass. Now Elena lay in a stasis field, her heartbeat a faint, artificial rhythm. She survived 17 rounds to keep the galaxy from burning, but her survival had created a different kind of danger. Political martyrdom. The Zeloff hegemony demanded the eradication of the station to cleanse the shame of the traitor. The human fleets were priming their railguns, interpreting the assassination attempt as a declaration of war. Vex stood over Elena's suspended form, looking at the monitor where her life hung by a thread. He realized then that bureaucratic violence would not solve this. The protocols were too slow, the anger too hot. To save the Pact, he had to break the law. He turned to Commander Reeves, who stood by the door, her hand resting on her sidearm. "Justice isn't surrender. It is the ultimate form of civilization," Vex said, the words heavy with intent. "We cannot let the fleets engage. We must find Krell ourselves. We must show them cross-species justice before the first warship fires." Reeves nodded, a sharp, steel-edged movement. "Then we hunt." The corridor on Zenith 9 dissolved into a strobe-light nightmare of plasma bolts and shrapnel. Vex shielded his face, his chitin plating chipping under the onslaught of Krell's renegade faction. He was a biological tank, an apex predator of the Zeloff hegemony, yet he found himself awestruck by the soft-skinned creature beside him. Reeves moved with the terrifying adrenaline-fueled velocity of a deathworlder. While Vex relied on armor, Reeves relied on sheer, reckless kinetic energy. She vaulted over a debris field, sliding under a lethal volley of fire, and discharged a concussion grenade with surgical precision. The explosion didn't kill the defenders. It disoriented them just long enough. "Move up," Reeves roared, her voice cracking with the strain. She took a glancing hit to her shoulder burn that would have sent a Xyloth into immediate molting shock, but she barely flinched. This was the terrifying Terran spirit the galaxy whispered about, a biology that converted pain into fuel. "You are damaged," Vex stated, firing a suppression round over her head. "I'm angry," she corrected, reloading in a blur of motion. "There's a difference." They breached the command deck. The blast doors hissed open to reveal Captain Krell standing by the viewport, the massive silhouette of the human fleet casting a long shadow over him. The sensors screened critical mass was seconds away. The fleets were powering their main cannons. Krell didn't raise his weapon. He spread his arms, mandibles clicking in a rhythm of smug satisfaction. "Do it?" Krell chittered, his voice amplified across the room. "Kill me. Make me the martyr that burns the Millennium Pact to ash. Let the humans see their diplomat avenged with blood. Let my death be the spark." Reeves raised her rifle, the laser sight centering on Krell's primary eye. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Vex felt the tension in the air, thick and electric. If she fired, Krell won. If she executed him, the Xyloth High Council would view it as an act of aggression, not justice. It was the trap of political martyrdom, perfectly set. "Reeves," Vex rumbled, a low warning frequency. "I know," she whispered. She dropped the rifle. Before Krell could react to the confusion, Reeves surged forward, not with a weapon, but with her bare hands. It was a display of raw human ingenuity mixed with brute force. She tackled the Xyloth captain, using the momentum to drive him into the bulkhead. It wasn't a kill shot, it was a takedown. Vex was there instantly, applying the neural cuffs. Krell thrashed, screaming for death, screaming for the war he had engineered. "You don't get to die today," Reeves panted, wiping a streak of blood from her cheek. "You get to stand trial. Publicly. Transparently." Vex opened the general channel, broadcasting the image of the captured, living traitor to both fleets. "This is High Admiral Vex. The rogue actor is in custody. There is no blood debt. Stand down." The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. Then, slowly, the weapon signatures on the orbital scanners turned from red to green. The railed guns powered down. The heat of the orbital siege began to dissipate. The medical bay was quiet, the hum of the healing tank the only sound. Elena Vance was awake, pale, but alive. Systemic resilience was more than a political theory. It was the woman sitting up in the bed, watching the news feeds of the joint tribunals. Vex stood by the window, looking out at the stars. Reeves sat in a chair nearby, her arm in a sling. "They are calling it a new era," Vance said softly, her voice raspy. "Cross-species justice. We almost lost it," Vex admitted, turning to look at the two humans. The instinct to kill him, it was overwhelming. Reeves looked at Vex, a tired smile touching her lips. "That's the job, isn't it? Holding the door open, even when your arms are shaking." Vex nodded, feeling a profound respect settle in his chest. The humans were fragile, soft, and short-lived, that their capacity to choose restraint over rage, to forge an unbreakable bond in the face of annihilation, made them the strongest allies the galaxy had ever known. "The Pact stands," Vexex said. "The Pact stands," Reeves agreed.